Hey guys, in this episode we are joined by Evan Botello. Evan has years of experience as a software developer in crypto and has helped build multiple Web3 meetup groups. We discuss his transition from finance to programming, his thoughts on the Ethereum versus Bitcoin debate, and what he intends to build in the future. With that being said, let's get into it.
All right, welcome to the show, Evan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I've been talking to Sam a bit on the Discord, so I'm excited to talk here over audio instead of text. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Good to have you. So me and Sam, we believe I don't know, there's a lot of stigma to the corporate environment. And we were looking on your LinkedIn and I saw that you started consulting. That's your first experience you have. Was that out of college? And what was the mindset that you had? Okay, you want to go into consulting, what was your long-term plan, joining something like that consulting? Because that kind of has that corporate stigma to it.
Yeah, so I don't know how far back you want me to go here, but I can kind of talk about the reason I got into that. So out of school, my first job was actually in finance at Freddie Mac, and I kind of just fell into it. I had an interest in it. I studied econ and a little bit of finance in school, and so that was my first gig out of college. It wasn't the consulting gig, and I did that for about a year and a half, and I was doing apps on the side. And so me and a buddy had been building little web applications, and we were trying, and we had different ideas that we were cycling through. And eventually I got plugged into Python and so the first app that I built was actually an app for Coinbase. It was using the Coinbase API. And Coinbase, back in the day, actually used to have this product called I think it was just called Coinbase Apps. And so you could build apps and then they would feature it on their app store. And so they got rid of that a few years back. But so I did that. And then once I built it and I realized that I could code a product that was featured on an app store, I was thinking to myself, I actually want to get out of finance and into software development, but I didn't have the confidence to really do it until I had that experience of just building it. And so the reason I landed in consulting was because that was the first company that would hire me. So I was interviewing in a few different places, and I lived in the DC area, and around there's just so many jobs like that because there's all these little consulting shops that win some contract and need to staff up quick. And so that type of business was much more likely to take a chance on someone like me who didn't really have a degree or have any professional experience coding. Was just stuff I had on GitHub. So that was really the reason I got in. It was the first company that gave me a job offer. So it turned out to be a great gig, but yeah, that's the background.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, because I know there's a lot of people who think you have to go join this big corporation to go learn everything. But you was just okay, let me just get a job. You were already doing these stuff on the side that you were doing yourself and freelancing, quote unquote. But you just joined it to get a job, basically.
Yeah, it was really I felt that I wanted to take it seriously and take programming or software development seriously. And so I figured the best way to do that, because I really did not want to go back to school. I just finished 4 years doing that and was over it. And so, yeah, I just figured, that was the easiest thing. So interviewed at 3 or 4 places, and that, like I said, that was the first one to give me a gig. It was really, they had really cool contracts with the government. I ended up working on my first job. I ended up working on the online application for U.S. citizenship. It was the first time they took it from the paper application to a web application. And so that was pretty neat, getting to work on that.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. So would like when you were in college, was it that whole time were you starting to get into programming and software development, or was that not till after you graduated? Like when did
Um,
you pick that up?
yeah, so like I'd always sort of tinkered and like in it, but I didn't really take it seriously. Like I could like hack together some HTML and CSS, but I didn't really take software development seriously until senior year and
Of high school or college?
a college,
Okay,
sorry.
you're good.
And that kind of continued into my first year at Freddie Mac. And yeah, so
That's awesome. Did you like I don't know how old you are exactly, but like you grew up obviously in like there's a dot-com bubble, which I was born like the year after that. And like there's just like that was like a really bad thing that happened for like technology, but then like the 10, 15 years after that, it's literally just been like it's just been growing so fast. Did you is that the reason like you got into it, or did someone influence you like to get into software programming, or how did you like come across it in general?
I had so the way it happened was really just I had a really good friend. We're still friends. His name's Andrew, and we were in student government together. And he was a double major computer science econ, and so we met through like econ, that sort of thing. And then I got into my interest in software development came from my friendship with him, and he really had a big hand in like kind of guiding me or like guiding my self-taught path because I am self-taught. So I really, um, yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. I leaned on him a lot when I was learning
It was like your
things.
mentor in a sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hours over the years, just like entertaining my questions. Um, so yeah, super helpful to have someone like that in your life if that's the path you're going down. Or
Um,
any path where you're self-taught, I guess.
mhm. I mean, on the topic of being self-taught, would you encourage other people who want to get into perhaps coding or another field to go down the self-teaching route? Or do you think going through college or some other type of schooling is necessary?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it kind of depends on the type of person you are. If you're the type of person that can bang your head against the table for hours and not get discouraged by that, working through a problem, I think it's like definitely doable. It definitely requires a certain degree, like especially this particular topic we're talking about, software development. It definitely requires a certain amount of like persistence and like grit to just get through this tough stuff. So like it's hard in that sense. So I probably wouldn't recommend it to like everyone, but it's definitely doable. And there's a whole industry around it now. So when I started, and by around it, I mean around this like self-taught path for computer science, when I started trying to pick this stuff up in like 2011, there was like some stuff out there that was pretty structured and like easy for people, someone like me, to go in and kind of go through. But like now there's a ton. I mean, there's whole boot camp industries and online courses and stuff. So like it's definitely like the path is a lot more like approachable, I guess now. I think the benefit of like a degree path is you get like you get like some of the like much harder concepts. You have a forum to ask questions that like doesn't exist on like an online course, which is super helpful. So I don't know, but then again, you're like spending 4 years doing that and not getting paid. And
Right.
so yeah, I guess it's trade-offs.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, like you brought up a good point, like how about like how everything is transitioning away from like this like idea of like authoritarian and like, oh, we have to go to this school and they're going to teach me everything. But now like people are realizing that there's so many people out there that are like giving out resources and making these courses and whatnot. They're actually not like gurus that are just making money, but like people that are actually trying to help other people learn. And I think
Yeah.
like it speaks a lot to like blockchain, like technology and crypto in general, because like it's like this anti-authoritarian system, and like they coded this thing and it's for everyone. It's not just like one person at the top that controls who learns what, which I think college is really leaning towards that now a lot. Like they're having so much control over what these students are learning and they're paying millions or thousands of dollars to go to school for.
Yeah. I mean, crypto was really one of the things that kept pulling me in to software development because it was
so could you tell us like about like how you came across crypto, like what was so attractive to it?
Yeah, and it's funny, it's like I don't actually remember the first time I was like exposed to the concept. I just remember over time like kind of picking up bits and pieces and being like, oh, that's still a thing. Like, so the first time I probably heard about it was senior year of school, but like I don't really remember. Like it wasn't like, you know how some people talk about like they saw something on Hacker News and it was like a religious experience. It was like, no, I read a few headlines and I like every once in a while over the span of a year, I'd see another one. And so sometime in like 2013-ish timeframe, so when I was working at Freddie, I really got, I went down the rabbit hole on it. And I did like a presentation. I remember we had this thing at work in that consulting gig where we had like mock presentations, and I remember reading up a lot on Bitcoin because I presented on Bitcoin. But to be honest, like being in finance actually sort of like it actually didn't help me investigate crypto more. It actually made me more skeptical, and I think that's interesting because like if you have a financial background, you come in, when you learn about something like crypto, you bring all your bias. Like I remember taking this monetary theory class in school, and we learned about like how like the ability for the central bank to control liquidity is a good thing. And so when I realized that like Bitcoin didn't have that, and I was like, oh, this can't work as a currency. You know, it's it'll never work. And so I had that bias kind of baked in. And so it actually took me longer to really go down the rabbit hole than I think if I didn't have those preconceptions of like what makes good money or whatever. But then over time, of course, I realized it's like way more than just money. It's about more than money. It's about like, you know, like decentralized programs and things like that.
Yeah, there's so much you can build on top of it. Did you,
Yeah.
so you glossed over it just like a little bit. You said you like put together a presentation about Bitcoin and presented it to your consulting firm?
Yeah, it was really just like, so they had all the new like fresh blood at the company go through these like presentation classes where like you just pick up, you know, I guess like because you're presenting to clients, they want you to have like a little bit of practice, I guess.
Right.
And so you just pick some random topic and you put something together. And so I put it together a thing on Bitcoin. And so that was really the first like thing where I was like, maybe I should. Well, I figured in order to do this presentation right, I need to learn more about it. And so that was like part of my way.
Did you get like, so that was back in like 2016, I guess it was at your consulting job. So
Yep.
what did like people say to you like after like you brought up this term? Because like I feel like it was super new. That was before the 2017 little run.
I mean, everyone just thought it was weird. You know, they were like, this is pretty weird. Like nobody really understood it. And to be honest, I didn't really understand it either. I was
funny,
trying
I can relate. I did it like I took a government and politics class here at State, and it was like everyone had to go through and like choose a bill and then give a presentation on it. And I chose some bill, and it was like in Wyoming or something, and it was like banks like approving like I don't know transactions or something like that. And I presented it, and everyone was so clueless. They were like, "What is this dude presenting on? Like, what is like Ethereum? What is like blockchain?" And they were so confused. And my professor was just like some boomer, and he was like, "Oh, this is quite an interesting topic, Kyle." I was like, "All right."
Yeah, I mean, those type of topics, like, they're great because it forces you to really, at least to try to understand it, because it's such a complicated thing to talk about that, like, you really show that you don't know what you're talking about if I feel like when you're presenting on a complicated topic like that, it's easy for people to tell, like, if you really understand it or not. And so I don't know, it's good stuff to like cut your teeth on.
Yeah, I think teaching is like a great way to learn. Like at the same time,
Yeah.
you can like try to study all this information, but if you're not like articulating it into words and like expressing it to someone else, then I feel like it's hard for you to like capture like what you're learning. But you keep it in your mind when you try to teach someone else, which I guess is why you started like Web3 Triangle, right? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So actually, the first meetup I started was in the DC area. So I started a meetup called DC Blockchain Developers. And this was 2017, 2018 timeframe. And I did it because I just wanted to meet people. Like that was really the main reason. I wanted to meet other people that were interested in this stuff. And I didn't want to have to fly to like an Ethereum conference to do that. I just wanted to do it like, in the town I was in. And so it was great. That was, I found a sponsor for the meetup. There was another DC-based consulting firm that was trying to win a bunch of blockchain contracts with the government. So they were like willing to spend a bunch of money to cater the events. And
So how did you find a sponsor? Like I didn't know that it was necessarily like you needed a sponsor for an event like that. Like what is the process of like getting a sponsor to like organize an event?
Yeah, so it was sort of just chance. Like when I started it, it was like I was working in a WeWork. So I was working in the K Street DC WeWork. And at the time, WeWork was just like giving away, like they were, if you worked at a WeWork, you could host an event there for free. And so I had like one or two events at the WeWork I was at where I had the meetup, people in the meetup come there. And a guy came who was who worked at a consulting firm, and he was like, "Hey, you know, my company is trying to get their name out for this type of work and this type of development. Why don't we sponsor this, and then we can have it at our office?" And so anyway, his name was Jake, and yeah, it was great. So it was just like I met a guy who worked at a company that was interested in it. So that was great. So while I was living in DC, that event, I did that monthly and met a lot of cool people who are doing like awesome things in the Ethereum ecosystem now. And so when I moved to the Raleigh area, I wanted to start something similar because I met so many great people there. I was like, oh, there's probably more people here, and so I can't actually take the credit for starting Web3 Triangle. I don't know, Sam, if you met Warren, like at one of the events or not. But so I searched the area to see if anything else was happening. And he had a meetup group, but he hadn't had any events yet. So I DM'd him on Twitter. I was like, hey, like, I see that you haven't had an event. Like, why don't we go ahead and do this? Because it was like, sort of like coming on the second year after COVID hit. And so I think people were like a little bit more willing to like get out of their house and go places and, whatever. And that was his reason, I think, that he hadn't actually had an event yet, was because of COVID. But so yeah, so he kicked off the first event, and I ended up coming to the second one, and I just been coming after that. And so Web3 Triangle, Triangle Web3.
Oh, I said it wrong. That's my fault.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. So I was calling it Triangle Crypto, and then Oren wanted to kind of brand it more like the Web3 vein. So I just went along with it. And so we sort of like admin the Discord together, and at least at first that's what we were doing. And so it was like a combination of in-person stuff and online stuff. And so, yeah, so that's how that whole thing came about. It was sort of like other people were thinking of doing like a Web3-ish meetup, and I was thinking about it around the same time. And so I just was kind of like, kind of pushing Oren a little bit more to just go ahead and do it. Because he's he's like a really great guy. He's really plugged into the Ethereum like community. So I think it was awesome that he sort of started doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, he seems like a really cool guy. And I saw the episode where he was on Bankless, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So seeing how like you had a group back in 2018 all the way to now 4 years later, like you were sort of involved in this niche, I guess. Did you like notice specifically from that role how like they continue to grow as I guess the crypto community as a whole continue to grow? Did you see like barely anyone coming to your meetups in Washington, D.C. 4 years ago, and now it's like a lot easier to get members?
Actually, there was like a lot of people coming in Washington, D.C. Yeah, it was actually kind of crazy. Like we couldn't, like the space couldn't accommodate. So I had to put caps on the events because like people would just show up and like we didn't have enough space for them. Yeah, I mean, like part of it I think around that time was like it was a new sort of like computing industry, and like in that area there's a lot of firms that are just like vying for work from the government. So a lot of people were just trying to position themselves as like, oh, I can do this crypto stuff, and like therefore like I'll be able to win contracts. And so a lot of people were coming from that angle. Like they wanted to like get exposure to the stuff so that if their company was bidding on work, like they could put down that like, you know, they were experienced or whatever. But like there were some people, like I would say that, so that was like about half of the people that were coming. And then the other half of people who were like genuinely like interested in the crypto stuff and wanted to build like software on Ethereum, or like wanted to build out like, you know, dApps. And so there was a ton of interest there. And I actually think there's a lot of interest here too in the Triangle. Triangle's like not as big of an area as DC, and it's a little more spread out. So I think like there's probably a lot of people in Raleigh who don't make the trek over to Durham for the events that we have there, because that's where all the events have been happening so far. And so I've been thinking a little bit about doing something in Raleigh, because, you know, it's just another like sort of city center that I think a lot of people would come out if you know, if it was a little bit closer to where they were. It's actually closer to where I am too. So
Yeah, I guess that does make sense, since in DC it's definitely so much bigger, and there's so many more businesses that might be related to that. Whereas in Raleigh, especially crypto related, we really only have like Colito, and maybe some small things. But so being in a group like that, I guess, would you say you've like specifically noticed any benefits or like anything that's helped you grown from being in that, like a group like that?
yeah, for sure. I mean, part of it is like just the, I guess, serendipity. Like there's a lot of stuff that like I'm much more exposed to what Oren is working on at Gnosis than I would have been if I hadn't met him. And you know, finding out about cool projects that people are building. So part of it is just like that, like, you know, you get a bunch of smart people together and you just learn cool stuff. And that was really my goal from the beginning. Like my goal with the meetups was really more like, it wasn't really focused on like, I have a specific outcome I'm looking for. It was more like, I want to meet smart people who are working on interesting stuff, just because that's how you find out about like the most interesting things going on. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like it's hard to quantify it, I guess is what I'm saying. Is like the benefits are like a little bit hard to like point by point lay out. But you know, yeah, for me, half of it is like the social aspect, because a lot of crypto is online, you know, and it's good to like see people, I guess. But yeah, part of it is also just like seeing what people's passion projects are and like learning something from that.
So what would you say, like, if I was someone and I'm like skeptic about joining like a group like this, and it's like, okay, you're going to this group of strangers, and like I do like what they're talking about, but like what would you say to someone that's like on the line of like, oh, should I even join? Like, is it even going to be worth it? Like maybe touch on some things that they might gain personally if they do join. Like,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like just a group of like-minded people, like being around a group of like-minded people who are interested in the same types of things. Like that's pretty easy to find online these days with Twitter and stuff. Like it's pretty easy to find like niche groups. But like finding that in your local area is something special, right? Because there's like when you get together with people, the conversations you have are like higher fidelity, right? It's like you can kind of go on tangents and like explore different ideas and talk about different things where you might not necessarily have that kind of conversation experience online, you know? I mean, Twitter threads get crazy, but yeah, it's not really the same thing. Like I'm exposed to a lot more just like random interesting stuff, I think, through like meeting people at the meetups than I would be if I hadn't gone. And you know, also like, you know, a lot of people in crypto, there's like largely like two types of people in crypto, right? Investors and builders. And if you are like the investor type, like a lot of people at the meetup are the builder type, but if you are the investor type, it's also a great way to like get exposed to new projects that you may not have known about, and maybe a little bit under the radar. And, you know, like just getting exposure to that early kind of gives you a little bit of an edge. And a lot of people, I've met like quite a few investor types who come to the meetup, I think for that reason, actually, to like find new and interesting projects that they can maybe invest in at some point.
yeah. So you mentioned like there's two different types of people in investing and building. What should you say that you are? I might already know the answer from this
I
conversation.
mean, I'm a pretty bad investor, but I am an investor. I try not to like day trade, I guess.
Like what what do you think like influences you more about like the crypto space, like for you to become a builder? Like what's more valuable to you about being a builder of the crypto space than just putting your money in and letting it sit and ride because you believe in it?
Yeah, I think well, like what really like hooked me early on with the building stuff was just the like, I don't know if permanence is the right word, but like just the idea that like you can ship a product out, like launch it onto the chain, and it's just like there forever. And you know, like in the Web2 world, as soon as you stop paying your AWS bill, like your app's gone forever. Your data's gone. It just vanishes, like it never existed. And with crypto, it's like it exists, like as long as there's someone out there verifying the chain. And so that concept was like really cool and powerful. And I was like, oh, that's awesome, right? And so sorry, I kind of forget your question at this point.
No, yeah, you answered it. Yeah, I was just asking you what resonated you with being a builder, and you answered it on the dot.
Yeah, so it's just like a different paradigm, right? It's like there are more there's like interesting there's just different directions you can take your projects when you have that kind of like that new sort of like dimension that you can build on.
Yeah, it's so valuable. I think like have like blockchain technology, how anyone can build on it and anyone can use it if you upload it. But I feel like the biggest like thing that's holding it back is like scalability. And like obviously if we threw everyone on the blockchain right now, or like if for Ethereum, for example, I don't think that it would sustain. If like there were 300 million people on Ethereum right now, it wouldn't work. So like what do you think, like what do you think the steps are, like as far as like a blockchain ecosystem? You could talk about in Ethereum and specifically, like what do you think the steps are to like proper scalability?
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of smarter people than me working on that. But like at least from what I understand, like I don't know, like different projects are attacking it in different ways, and I'm really not sure which is best. like Ethereum has largely gone down this path of like, instead of modifying the layer one so much that it's unrecognizable so that it can scale to like 1 billion people, it has taken the approach of like, we're going to be a layer 2 ecosystem. So like, I think they've taken the position that over time, all users will mostly migrate to layer 2s, and then that those layer 2s will drive their security from Ethereum. So Ethereum, like, it seems like the way Ethereum is solving this is it's becoming a chain of chains where like all these other chains exist and they all sort of like stake their security to Ethereum. And so the only people like in 20 or 30 years mining into Ethereum will be like whales and other chains because the transaction costs will be so high. But they'll be cheap on layer 2s. So like it's interesting because they're taking like a modular approach. But it's also like sort of like, I have a hard time wrapping my head around like just the fragmentation of that. Like, you know, some projects picking one L2 and other projects picking another L2, and like that might be confusing for people, right? Like to a normal non-crypto person, like that's just kind of weird. So yeah, I mean, like I think it's one of those things where like the market will figure it out like over time. You know, other chains have taken an approach where they want the layer one, the base layer, to accommodate you know, global scale. And that comes with a different set of trade-offs. Like on the one hand, it's like you have one network that everyone can align around, and it's maybe less confusing from that perspective, but your trade-off is like it's less decentralized. And you just have these huge, you just require so much hardware, like so much compute to run a node that only a few people can do it. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it'll be like use case specific, where games and stuff migrate to one type, and money and NFTs migrate to another type of ecosystem. But it's definitely not clear to me at all, like how that's going to play out, which is interesting. I think if someone claims that like they do know how it's going to play out, they're like lying or they're just delusional or something, because it's pretty complicated. Like even at work right now, there's like, we speculate a lot internally about like how we think it's going to play out, and there's lots of differences of opinion. Like between really smart people on how they think that scaling stuff is going to work.
Right. I agree with you on the part, like, it's like, I feel like once everything matures to the point where like everything's set in stone, it's going to be like certain protocols are meant for certain things. And like you said, like NFTs or like smart contracts or whatnot, like there's going to be a winner in each niche. And eventually all these niches are just going to grow into insane programs. So touching on that, like you're a software engineer at Gemini. So what is Gemini's? Could just touch on like what Gemini is in general for anyone who doesn't know what it is, and like what the goals that they're trying to reach are.
Yeah, so Gemini was started in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, as a Bitcoin exchange. And it was because the founders, Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss, were like, someone exposed them to Bitcoin and they got really excited about it and they bought a bunch. I think at one point they owned like a lot. I don't know if they still do, but so yeah, so started off as a Bitcoin exchange, and then they've been growing to capture more markets and also a bigger slice of the crypto market. So now it's more, there's like a ton of currencies on there, not just Bitcoin, and they have other business lines of business. So they just launched like credit card line of business, which I think is the only exchange that has launched a credit card business. Like there's other debit card businesses, like Coinbase has a debit card and so on and so forth. But so we have a credit card, and and the tie-in with crypto is that your rewards are in crypto. So like you pay with your credit card, and then if you get like 1% cash back, then you can just any coin that we have, you can get it in that. And then they bought Nifty Gateway in, actually I don't remember what year they bought them, but so they bought Nifty Gateway, and they've been growing that as like the NFT, like their exposure to the NFT world. And so that's most of what I work on, is that NFT marketplace. And yeah, and so Gemini has other lines of businesses too. I think like Gemini, from what I can tell, is like, what I've seen, is really focused on being like the easiest, most compliant way to onboard on cryptos, like, go from fiat to crypto. And yeah, so
Yeah, so obviously like the Winklevoss twins, a lot of people will recognize as the people who sued Zuckerberg.
yeah.
But so looking at your experience, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but so it seems like you kind of started out as a software engineer, at least in crypto. You were at BitSite, and then when you left BitSite, you went to Gemini.
Yeah.
Would you say like there's any distinct differences? Because BitSite obviously in comparison to Gemini is relatively small. Would you say like there's any distinct differences you notice moving up to a bigger company? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the differences I think are more a reflection of like the type of industry they're in. So like there's to be honest, like they're not that different in size. I think BitSite was maybe half the size of Gemini. Like it's not like I went from like a super small to like a multinational, like Google or something. But so it actually didn't seem like that big of a difference to me. I think just being in, like, touching the finance world is like a totally different set of like risks, I guess. And so there's like, when you're working in a regulated financial institution, like there's disclosures and stuff. So like at BitSite, I never had to like disclose what my assets were, but working at Gemini, you do. And so that's a little bit different. And then when you're building products, you also have to consider, like, when you're working in crypto, which touches the finance world, you have to consider like compliance and stuff. Whereas that might not have been a huge consideration. It just had a normal SaaS company like BitSite.
So are you working fully remote?
Yeah. So Gemini went fully remote, I believe, because of COVID. So it was like they were fully in person, I believe, before COVID, and then the whole world changed. And Gemini was headquartered in New York, and as you remember, New York was like a huge. That's a tricky place to be working in person in New York City, and so I think it was just like sort of necessity that Gemini went fully remote.
I'm curious, do you think like blockchain, like obviously like COVID hit and like it just everyone went from like in person and like all on-site stuff to remote work, and like we're kind of evolving, I would say, as society. Some would argue that we're not evolving and it's kind of hurting our productivity. What is your thought on like if remote work is better? Obviously there's different occupations, but like in general, do you think like working remote is, if we're moving towards that as a society, do you think that's going to be better overall, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this because I went from fully in person to fully remote overnight. Like it was literally like one day in April 2020. I was like, I never went into an office ever again after that. So that's been weird. And I think the experience, like, it's an interesting question because I think in my perfect world, I would work from the office like a couple days a week. I would go to the office to have like those more free ranging conversations that maybe aren't so easily time boxed into like 30-minute Zoom calls, like when you want to sort of jam a little bit on a concept. That's a little bit harder to do over Zoom for whatever reason. Like that type of thing where you're just like you have a problem space and you're just trying to explore it and think about different ways that you could attack that. That's not the easiest to do over Zoom, but everything else I think is like better remote. In knowledge work, my type of work, I think specifically, like when you sometimes do not need to be in an office in order to just put your thinking hat on and write some code. I think that's better at home or wherever you want to be, to be honest.
Right.
Wherever you're most productive.
Right. I think there's a right balance. Like obviously, like if you're doing all this knowledge work, like you said, it's like super good for you to just like focus in, zone in, do the work. But at the same time, like if you want to see like new ideas come in and like be creative, then like the meetups like you organize, like those are so beneficial to like create these like spontaneous ideas and like, oh, let me throw this idea around and see what other people think, and then maybe we'll find it and then go back after we finalize something and put in all that knowledge work, and then it might actually be a lot better instead of just you trying to do it all online.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a right balance.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the meetup. I mean, that honestly was a big motivation with the meetup that I started here in the Triangle, or not, not that I started, but that I've been helping with, helping Oren grow. And it, part of it was like, because I'm remote so much, like it's really good to get out and see people, like you mentioned. So that was a big motivation. Like I think people who do work remote, I think have more reasons to come out than maybe someone who spends 50 hours in an office. I think someone who spends 50 hours in an office, I think is actually less likely to come out to the meetup.
I would be,
because that sucks so much of your energy, right?
Yeah, that's crazy that like we've created this like model of like going to work for 50 hours a week in an office and like don't leave and just keep doing the same work with the same people every day. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Actually, I was talking to Griffin. It's kind of funny because twins started Empty Gateway and twins run Gemini, and it's just like kind of this funny twin thing. But I was talking to one of them, Griffin, one of the guys that runs Empty Gateway, and he was saying that like he thinks it's actually easier to measure results with remote workforce because the only thing you have to measure is what they're building. Like you can't measure them sitting in an office. Like you can't measure like how often they're there or for how long they stay. And it's kind of good because that doesn't matter, right? It's like really what you're producing. And so you can kind of just look at at least for developers, you can look at how much code or like how many products they ship or the code that they're writing to see their output. And you don't really need to have them in an office for that, like at all. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of buy-in on the remote thing, I think, at Gemini.
Yeah, so backtracking a little bit, you were talking about how being at Gemini, it's a little different because it's a regulated exchange, so you have to report a lot of things that you wouldn't have had to otherwise. And I think a lot of people in crypto forget that there's so many companies that have to listen to like some of the US branches like the SEC. And like you saw this recently with Tornado Cash, with them getting sanctioned, and then GitHub removed the source code. So I guess transitioning to GitHub, you in your Twitter bio, you have your GitHub link where you, I mean, I don't know, I haven't looked into it too much, but explain to us a little bit what you do with GitHub and what you upload there, I guess.
Yeah, so GitHub is where, for my personal projects, I put, like, if I want it to be open source, I'll push it up to GitHub. And GitHub is basically where people store their code. And GitHub has added like collaboration features and things of that nature over the years. And so it's a lot easier for people who don't even know each other really to work on the same code base. and contribute to the same code base together, and have discussions about code changes that are suggested, and then take suggestions and merge them into the code base. So I use GitHub for both work and for personal stuff. That's where the code is stored.
Yeah, I think the thing you said about being able to like do it with someone that you don't know, that you see that a lot in crypto, like people starting projects and companies that have never even met each other. It just is like so much more common, I guess. And I guess that could be due to COVID and everyone's remote now. But
yeah, for sure.
I saw after the sanctioning news, I saw people were on Twitter, they were talking about, I don't remember the name of it, but there's a decentralized version of GitHub. I think it starts with an R. Have you heard of that?
Radical. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have heard of it. It's pretty cool. I actually haven't used it at all, but I've been kind of itching to try it out. Yeah. It's on my list to try for sure.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of like, I don't know if you can relate to this, but like with blockchain technology, like everyone thinks that like everything should just be decentralized, and like even if like for Discord, for example, it isn't completely decentralized, but like there's people out there that are trying to make completely decentralized platforms, and like I think like a way that we can really like mature like as a niche or as an industry of crypto, I feel like we need to balance like we don't have to put everything into decentralization. Like there's things that are meant to be centralized, at least to some extent, and like we shouldn't force everything that we do to be a decentralized organization or a DAO or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and like the meetup group is a good example of it. Like I don't really have much desire to move our chat in Discord to like a decentralized forum, because like we mostly just joke around and stuff. So it doesn't, I don't think it really requires that level of like censorship resistance really that you might need from like money or something.
Right.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's great that people are working on things for less obvious applications of decentralization. Like for example, like social networks. When I had started using crypto, I wouldn't have really thought of a social network as a thing that like you would care to decentralize, but like now that like it's the main way that people share news, and like we saw a bunch of censorship happen on social networks over the previous years. It's like a little more obvious to me now that maybe that's important. So maybe over time people's ideas of like what should and shouldn't be decentralized will change.
Yeah, I agree. I think that free speech thing just kind of like relates all back to like Bitcoin founding. Like the reason they founded or Satoshi, whoever it is, Satoshi Nakamoto, they founded Bitcoin because of like censorship and like problems with like authority, and like they're having too much control over what everyone is doing as a society. That brings me to the question of like, so there's Bitcoin and then there's Ethereum, and obviously Bitcoin is like it's probably the most decentralized protocol I think personally that I've come across, and then there's also Ethereum, and they're like still making changes to it. So what do you think is like the better route? Like, do you prefer Bitcoin, like complete decentralization, or do you think that Ethereum is better? Or like what is your thoughts on like the coding for that?
Like I own both. So like I honestly don't really see them as, I see them as complements, not substitutes, I guess would be the economic way of saying it. Like I don't think Bitcoin is a substitute for Ethereum and vice versa. What's interesting about Bitcoin is like, I think like if you ask me like what crypto network will exist in 100 years, like I would say Bitcoin. I don't know if I would necessarily say that about Ethereum. And that's not a bad thing. I think the reason I think that is because maybe Ethereum changes so much that it's something else completely by the time 100 years gets around. Like it's because the social contract of that community is very allows for such change, such radical change. I think like in 100 years it could be something completely different. Like maybe we don't even call it Ethereum. Right. But I think that's kind of good, to be honest. Like I think there's a market for it, like for a network, a decentralized network that is malleable. And so I just kind of think they serve different purposes. And I think Bitcoin has a purpose and it serves it. That being said, I don't really spend much time thinking about it. Like I have some, it's, it's kind of just like sits there. I don't really spend it.
It's not something, or is it something you're actively like investing in? Like,
Yeah, but like kind of like dollar cost averaging. Like I don't really, beyond that, I don't really think about it at all. Ethereum is where all my like intellectual energy is spent, right? It's like because it's just like there's more of a creative like space for it, I guess. You can't really, I mean, Bitcoin people will hate me say this, but like I feel like you can't really do much with Bitcoin. I mean, it's important, but
yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a Ethereum bull for sure. Compared to Bitcoin, I'm in the long term, and it just like the point you made, like kind of like confirms my bias of like our society is like changing so fast, and like if we have this system, Bitcoin was launched in 2008. I mean, there's obviously you could argue both sides, but like Ethereum, they have the ability and they're like changing to like improve. So like you were saying, like Ethereum could be something completely different in 50 years, but that's because society is going to be completely different in 50 years. And Bitcoin doesn't have that flexibility like Ethereum does.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny because I think like Bitcoin could be an interesting like anthropological tool. Like I think like you could mine something into Bitcoin and like it's the only thing I have confidence in that will be around for a long time. So like if you need to put something on the internet that's like really important and you think you want future generations to see it, I honestly don't know where else you would put it other than on the Bitcoin blockchain, like mining some like arbitrary piece of text into a block. Yeah, like I don't know, like because Ethereum, for example, part of the Ethereum roadmap that they've been talking about is dropping state after a certain number of blocks. So like the chain will like history. So if you put something into an Ethereum block and then it changes at a certain point, that history of the fact that was used to be something else will like fall off, and some other network will store it.
That's theorized, or like that's something
theorized.
That might do.
That's something that they've been thinking about as like a scaling tool. So like, but like no, like I don't think Bitcoin would ever entertain that idea, like so it's just like it kind of illustrates the cultural difference, I think, between the two projects. Yeah. So
who do you think Satoshi Nakamoto is?
For the longest time I thought it was this guy. I'm like struggling to remember his name now, but he was always theorized to be one of the contenders. It was a law professor in DC.
I know there's a few, like Craig Wright is pretty, I don't know if that's who you're talking about. And then like
no, it's not Craig Wright. It's one of the guys that wrote one of the early like cryptocurrency papers. But I'm trying to remember his name. He works at George GW, I think, law school. Cool. Yeah, it's too bad. I'd look it up right now if I could like if I could remember part of his name, but I can't.
Right. I agree.
I guess one of the last things I wanted to touch on was it says you co-founded Next Software Group. So I guess just maybe a quick summary of what that is and why you founded that.
Yeah, so that was in between United Income, which was a startup I worked at in DC, and moving down to Raleigh, I did about a year. Me and a buddy worked on. Basically, we took a shot at starting our own company, and we went through a couple different ideas, but eventually spent most of our time working on like a crypto tax app. And so that was legal entity we spun up just to like be a holding company for those ideas, and for that work we were doing. So it was called BitBalance, and it's like shut down now. But yeah, that was the holding company for that like year or so that we were working on some startup ideas.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Seems like you got a lot of like you're dabbling into a bunch of fields and like trying to build a bunch of things. And I feel like in 10 years from now, man, you're gonna have something on your plate that's doing something, you know.
Thanks.
It's awesome that you're setting yourself up that way. Do you have we're just like closing out here. Do you have any like books or like recommendations on whether it like be getting into crypto, getting into coding, like getting into like projects and whatnot? Do you have any recommendations for books, YouTube videos, podcasts maybe?
So podcasts, I love Bankless for sure. That's a great one. The book I would say for crypto, I read, I think his name is like, he's a Greek guy, Andres Anopoulos. I think I'm botching his name, but he wrote a book on Ethereum, kind of like going through the internals. And so that was super helpful. I read that back in 2018 and really liked it. For coding, just generally, that's a tough one. I don't know if I have a great recommendation there. Yeah, there's a interesting book called Code is the title. I don't remember who the author is, but it's popular. If you search it on Google, you'd find it. And I read that and really like it. It goes into like some of the like really like the basics of computing, like bits 0 and 1, and like where that sort of like like the legacy of like the decisions for why computers are built that way. And so that's super helpful if you're like just starting out.
Awesome. And I think Mastering Ethereum, Building Smart Contracts and Decentralized Apps. Is that the book you read?
Mastering Ethereum, yeah. That's
okay, yeah. Just for the viewers.
Yep.
If you guys want to look at that, it's on Amazon.
Yeah, that's a great book.
So we normally end our podcast with a one question. And so what is one goal that you have in your career or personal life, and what actions are you taking to achieve it?
Yeah, that's great. So the one like serious project I'm working on right now outside of work, I would say is sort of like the biggest goal I have. It's to bring decentralized domains rooted in the handshake root zone to Ethereum. So there's a couple people already doing this. One is this company Impervious. They've done it with Forever Domains and a few other TLDs. But yeah, I'm really involved in the handshake ecosystem, and it's this blockchain that takes the idea of the root zone for the internet, which is like decides who controls the top level domains like com, org, net. You can think of those as like top level domains, and like IO. So when you type in like facebook.com, it's like there's this company VeriSign who owns .com, and they the only reason they own it is because some nonprofit in California says that they own it, right? And so this blockchain handshake takes that idea and puts it on the blockchain. So you can own a top level domain like that. So like I could own .evan and I could sell subdomains on that. So right now I have a project where I'm taking some top level domains that I own and building some Ethereum contracts that are largely based on ENS, the Ethereum name service, and repurposing that for this system. So that's my biggest goal right now. I've got some design documents up and some code down. So my goal right now is to finish it this year, but we'll see. With 2 kids, I don't know. Hopefully I get around to it.
That's awesome, man. You seem like a really like driven person, and I wish you the best for all the things that you're building. We appreciate you coming on. Love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, it's been great talking. Hopefully I didn't talk your ear off.
Oh yeah, you're good. Hi. See you.